at the end, which has happened before. So yeah, there'll be some people on this watching this replay who aren't yet working in breastfeeding support, because I run 2 levels of training, but I'll make sure that I mention both. So just a bit about me. My name's Anna. My background is paediatric nursing. I'm also an IBCLC. I trained as a meditation teacher quite a few years ago, not long after actually becoming a lactation consultant. So became an IBCLC in 2015. I'm also now a psychologist. I just finished my master's this year. And I live a bit of an internet, it sounds a bit flash, but it's really not. I live a bit of an international lifestyle at the moment. I live between Kent, UK, and Cape Town, South Africa. Right now, I'm in Cape Town with my family, but I am heading back to the UK on Friday for teaching and other bits and pieces that we've got going on there. So yeah, a bit here, there, and everywhere at the moment. But the good thing about that, which I really love, is that I can teach in person a few times a year, which I really, really enjoy. And my interest in this really is when I was doing my peds nursing, and I still do a little bit, it didn't really have a lot to do with lactation, but in the recent years, but I used to teach breastfeeding support, and I always say that when I was a nurse on the ward, I didn't always do it that well, and part of the reason for that was because we didn't really have training. I was young, I didn't have kids of my own, and then it was really through having my own kids that my interest in it grew. I became a peer supporter, peer supported for a few years, and then after having my daughter and having quite a complicated lactation journey, she was my third, decided, no, I definitely want to become an IBCLC and make this a bit of a specialism. And the rest is history, really. I kind of had an experience with her where I used, I'm just going to let Claire in, where I used a lot of mindset tools because I had a very low supply with her. And I also used relaxation quite a bit and discovered that made a big difference to how much I could pump, how our feeding went, how I felt about myself. So that all planted the seed for when I became a lactation consultant. I thought, I really want to focus on this emotional side of lactation. This is what really interests me. I'd also discovered meditation and mindfulness myself and trained in that. And then it kind of just all spiraled from there. And I've been teaching these courses professionals in one way or another since 2018. So this is actually our 6th year, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. Trained over 350 people around the world, and absolutely love what I do. So as I know that all of you here are like me, you love this subject, you love talking about birth, babies, motherhood, and that you're here because you're keen to support those in your local community to get the right help and support, that you probably love working with others, and you know that breastfeeding support is really important, and quite likely that I talked about this a bit in my live earlier, didn't I, Amy, about how in many places in the UK particularly it is inadequate, has been for quite a long time, but it's only got worse over the last few years. So we really need people like you, like me, to fill those gaps where people are not getting the support that they need. And there's so many reasons why breastfeeding support is important. I think I'm probably preaching to the converted a little bit here, but so many people start off when they've had their babies wanting to breastfeed and initiating breastfeeding, but run into problems for so many reasons. Sometimes it's because they don't have family support like other cultures. I taught in Turkey years ago, and they have much higher breastfeeding rates than in the UK, and they have a kind of culture where the mother is looked after and cared for the first 6 weeks. They have all the same breastfeeding problems that we do. They worry about, they have painful nipples, damaged nipples, they worry about their supply. The difference is in the support and information that they're given after they've had their babies, and that's why so many more of them manage to carry on breastfeeding. It's more nuanced than that. There's obviously lots of other areas as well, other issues as well. So we know that in the UK, we have a bottle feeding culture, and that's the way it's been for over 50 years now. And because of that, there isn't the knowledge in the community, in our culture, where people can teach their daughters, their nieces, their cousins, their friends about breastfeeding necessarily. We also live in a society that sexualizes breasts, so there's a lot of discomfort around breastfeeding, about what it is, about seeing it, about it being in public, and there's not enough conversation around that either. And we know that in our healthcare system, breastfeeding friendly solutions are not always given for breastfeeding problems, sadly. So, for example, formula and bottles may be the first option of giving a baby supplementation, whereas we know that in places where there's a good policy and there's a good infant feeding team in place, that they will usually find breastfeeding friendly solutions for babies who are struggling to feed at the breast for whatever reason. And this is a bit that I'm really interested in, which is, what does all this lead to? What are the experiences of new parents because of this? We know that breastfeeding is biologically expected by babies and by women's bodies after they've given birth. And this can mean that when breastfeeding is very difficult, or if it stops early, it can, sorry about the typos there, it can feel like a really negative experience. It can even feel traumatic. I don't know if you have read Amy Brown's book, Why Grief and Breastfeeding, Grief and Trauma Matter. And she did a study led onto her reading that book about the experiences of how people felt when breastfeeding didn't go as they wanted it to, when it stopped before they wanted it to. And it's quite sobering the words that those parents use. Things like that they're a failure, that they feel guilty, they feel resentful to others who can breastfeed and they can't. It's definitely worth reading if you don't have it. And we know from, it'll be interesting to redo this now, but from a few years ago now, a survey that was done was shown that 80% of breastfeeding mothers said they stopped breastfeeding before they had wanted to. And one of those reasons we know is to do with breastfeeding support not being available to everyone and not being the quality that it needs to be. And I know that in 2018, which is a long time ago now, lots happened since then, but even back then, 44% of breastfeeding services have been cut in the UK. Sorry, this is very UK centric, but that's the culture I know. I'm getting to know lactation and the experience with new parents here in South Africa. But this is a worldwide problem, and we know from the Lancet series on the marketing of formula milk that was done, and of breastfeeding and formula milk that was done last year. We know that this is a problem across the world. Breastfeeding rates are dropping, so it's not just relevant to the UK. So it doesn't have to be this way, and I have a big passion for teaching people who are interested in this to show them how that they can make a difference to breastfeeding, and how that breastfeeding support and education that they give can be built around mindful breastfeeding, around the emotional well-being of the parent and the baby, the whole family. I really believe that leading with that ethos is a fantastic way to offer breastfeeding support. So I don't know if any of you have got a workbook. I'm just going to put something in the comments quickly, because I know a couple of people signed up for this talk later than I sent the message out. So I'm just going to put a link there. So if you don't have the workbook, it's there for you, but you can also just have a pen and a journal. So what I'd love you to do is just spend 5 minutes writing down either in your workbook. So the link I've given you is something that's editable, so you can type it in if you want. Just to think about what breastfeeding support looks like in your community. So, this could be antenatal education. It could be, whether breastfeeding rates are high or low. Do people generally breastfeed? Do they not? What's the support like? Have you got local infant feeding teams? Have you got a tongue tie service? Have you, what about if somebody's struggling with breastfeeding, where would they go? Do you even know? So just spend a couple of minutes now writing down what is going on where you live in your community. And if you're done, of course, I can't see any of you, which is fine. But if you're done, if there's anything you want to share in the comments, then do go ahead, and I'll read them out. And of course, if you're watching on the replay, I'd love you to use the workbook and or your notepad and answer this question for yourself as well, because it's really important when we're thinking about moving into or changing our role as lactation professionals, adding something in, whether we're looking at training in something completely new. It's really important to think about, what the needs are, where we are, and that doesn't have to be in person. It could be that you've got an online community that you support, which is obviously another way of providing help and support to families. That's good to know, Taryn, that the Lecce League is good in your area. And I think I know your the Lecce League, one of your Lecce League leaders there in North London. And Jessica's also sharing some of her stuff. So LLL meetings, and it's great to have a thriving Lecce League community. We had it in Faversham in Kent. We still do. It's run for many years. Has had different leaders running it, but it's really great to know you've got that level of knowledge and expertise close by. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So the next thing is to think about how you would fill that gap in your community. And so I know that some of you are sharing what's available there. And I would argue that, I'd say it's great to have any Lecce League meetings, even once a month to be great. But 2 weeks can be quite a long time to wait, can't it, when you're learning to breastfeed a baby? And I know as well with Lecce League leaders, often they will give time over the phone and support in between those sessions as well. I know that probably every area is different, but what gap would you like to fill in your community? Would it be something like a free group, a low cost group, or something completely different? Would you see yourself working one-to-one with families? Would you like to focus on antenatal education? What is it that you would like to do? And there's so many answers to this question. And when you're writing this bit down, you could be thinking about, okay, what not necessarily the location or in what format would like to work people, but how you would like to support people. So is it that you'd like to go beyond the practical latching and positioning on latching and positioning? Of course, if you're a breastfeeding counsellor, you've already got that wealth of communication and listening skills, which is in itself a specialism, isn't it? But, where else would you like to take it? What else would you like to be able to help families with? We have some people who train with mindful breastfeeding that just want to work with second-time parents. I know people who just work with multiples, for example. I know people who run antenatal sessions, but they only like to do it one-to-one because they feel like they can really give their couple that bespoke time. They feel the people they work with can be really honest and open with each other. So there's so many different things you can do. So I'd really love you to just even close your eyes now for a minute and imagine yourself working in your community, doing the work you love. And I'm going to stop talking now for a minute and give you just a couple more minutes to write down what's coming up for you. And again, do share it in the comments if you feel happy to. Can you see now we're building up a little bit of a picture? We're thinking about what are the needs? What do I hear my friends, my colleagues, families that I work with, what do I hear them saying about what they find hard? What might they be telling me that they wish was different about support in your area? Really, where are you seeing the gaps and what are the needs? So that's the first part. And the second part is this part. What would you like to do? What would you like to do differently? What skills would you like to add on that meant that you'd be able to fill some of those gaps and provide the support that fills you up? Because it's really important if we're setting up a business or we're wanting to adjust and to change the work that we do, that it doesn't just work for our potential clients, but it must work for us as well. And when we're thinking about that, it's really important we think about what our current commitments are and where that might fit in. So anything new, including training, that is coming into our lives, we're going to have to make space for it. Otherwise, it's just going to become extremely stressful and overwhelming. I can't tell you the irony that existed doing a master's in positive psychology and well-being. It was such a frustrating experience because master's courses, as any of you who have done a master's will know, are extremely full on. And yet we were studying all this stuff about well-being, about slow living, about mindfulness, and the two things, it was a real struggle to match them at many times. But I had to make a lot of space in my life to do that master's. I don't think I perhaps realized it in the beginning. Sounds silly, how much space I needed to make. So definitely want to be thinking about, okay, this is what I'd like to do in my community. And this is why I want to do it. That's the kind of like your why coming in, your purpose, and what it is you love. But when you vision it, you've got to also think, okay, where's this going to fit in? Is there something else that I need to let go of? Perhaps you have a lot of space in your week and there's a place ready for this. And it's not just about providing the actual support. There are other things that go into running a business. And we'll talk about those a little bit in the next bit. We've already talked about this. So when would you run classes or offer support? So you've got to think about your family commitments if you have a family. And I know for many people who don't have children who come train me, they do have other family commitments, such as they might care for parents or they might have other things that they need to do in their week, of course. Work commitments also come into this. So you might already have a full-time job or a part-time job. How would offering extra services fit in around that? And like I mentioned, it's not just the actual provision of the services. You do need to think about marketing, building an audience or community. So that is something that takes time. And one of the percentages I've heard bandied around before, and I don't know if this is true, and do I work on my business in these percentages? Maybe, possibly I do now. They say about 1/3 is actually delivering your services when you have a service-based business. And then 2/3 is for the other stuff. So like the admin, marketing, networking, connecting with people, letting people know that this is what you do. I think when I first started off as a lactation consultant, I wanted to run antenatal classes. And I think I thought just by, having put the course together, the class together, that somehow people would just know that it was there, and chucking a few flyers around. And it did take a lot more than that. And I did build up my antenatal classes nicely in one town. And it started running as a really successful thing, but it definitely took a lot more time and effort than I realized in the beginning. So you definitely need to make time for that, time for doing your accounts, time for if you're wanting to create courses or create some kind of service, you need the creation time as well. So there are these other aspects other than just delivering the service itself. And then this third step is about thinking about what different options you might have for breastfeeding training. And I talked about tonight being kind of two different courses, two different workshops that I've done put together. And so I know this is about running a business, but I think for some people who are watching this, they might be thinking, what are the other options out there? So I'm just going to run through the options, the levels of breastfeeding support training, just very briefly with you all. I know some of you, especially those of you who are here, have actually trained in this already, so you will be aware. And this is going to be quite UK focused because that's what I know the best, but there are versions of this in many places in the world. So peer support training is your sort of first entry level training. And it traditionally in the UK, this is often done by charitable organisations who have peer support run services or services that include peer supporters. So I've been training peer supporters for quite a while. I've got a new set of peer supporters I'm training in Surrey coming up in March, which I'm very excited about. And this is where we courses are often around 18 hours. They can be more or less. And in exchange for training, you would normally then provide some volunteer hours for the organisation you trained with. One of the things with peer support training is that you often need to have breastfed your own baby for a certain amount of time. It's the clues in the name, really, peer support. You sort of have to have gone through it. And some people will recommend 6 months, some 9 months, and some people will be a year. It really depends on the area that you live in. And the next sort of level, if you like, in the UK we have is breastfeeding counsellor. So again, this can be free training through an organisation, and then you pay back your time, with your time. Breastfeeding counselling qualifications take longer, usually around about 2 years, depending on where you do it and who you do it with and how long you want to take over it. Some people are very busy. Many people are. They've often got babies and young children, so might be doing it in there. Might take a little bit longer than that. And there are a few organisations. Leche League we've mentioned quite a few times already, and that's one that I know quite well, although I'm not trained with them, but I've used the Leche League. I used them for many years for my own support, and I have lots of friends who are the Leche League leaders. There's also the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers, and the other one is NCT, which is quite well known in the UK. NCT course is a full degree, so it is paid for. And with that, I think you often pay back your time as well with the with telephone support. And then let's just move on to the IBCLC training. So I get asked about this a lot because many more people have heard about lactation consultants now, which is absolutely fantastic. It's really good that it's becoming more and more well known, but it is a significant amount of training. So it's probably something, well, it's definitely something that you would do later on when you've already worked in breastfeeding or supported in breastfeeding support for a while. And the reason I say that is because one of the elements that you need to become a lactation consultant is 1,000 hours of supporting breastfeeding families. So those could be volunteer hours, they could be hours as a health visitor or a midwife, but you do need those hours. You've got 5 years to get everything together before you take the exam. So that's one part. You also have to have a health degree or an equivalent to that. So if you're a health professional, it's easier to become an IBCLC. If you're not, and I know plenty of people who have done it this way, then you have to sort of do the equivalent of a health degree with different courses. Then you have 95 hours of lactation specific training to do. The good news is for anybody who is thinking, oh, I'd like to come an IBCLC, but I'm nowhere near, but perhaps I'd like to start my lactation training, that any of my courses would help your hours towards that. It's nowhere near the 95 hours that you need, but it would be a stepping stone to that lactation education that you need. And finally, once you've got all of that together, then you study for an exam, which is, yeah, it's quite a lot of work. But then you've done it and you recertify every 5 years. So if anyone wants to know more about becoming an IBCLC or wants any, directed, direction from me on that, I'll be very happy to help. It is a little bit confusing when you first start looking into it. And then there are these sort of, sorry, another typo. There are these kind of in-between courses like mine that allow you to train the specialism as well. So with the mindful breastfeeding training, we have 2 courses. We have foundations, which is sort of like your peer support level training, a little bit higher than peer support. And then after you've done that, you move on to the specialism, which is the mindful breastfeeding course. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. I've just gone through all of this. So there's a little bit about yeah, and I should say actually the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers, they do have a paid course now that's available for people who haven't breastfed, so they don't have that stipulation anymore as far as I'm aware. But yeah, there's also the Breastfeeding Network, of course, I forgot about them. They also have 2 levels of training. And there's a summary about becoming an IBCLC. And just briefly around outside of the UK, there's some different, every country has its own levels of breastfeeding and language around it. So we also have the Leche League in South Africa. Unfortunately, peer support doesn't really exist out here in a organised sense. In America, we've got certified lactation counsellor, which kind of sits between an IBCLC and then you've got a breastfeeding counsellor, which is more, I think, like a peer supporter. I'm not really sure, but they're sort of more in the middle kind of qualifications. And then in Australia, they've got breastfeeding counsellor courses as well. So it really is different everywhere that you go. So it's definitely worth having a little look and seeing what's around where you live. But the thing is, the IBCLC, the International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, really is an international qualification. No matter what country you're in, you do the same exam every year as everybody else. So I can understand why a lot of people do aim for that as their training. So now just a little bit about me and our courses. So we have foundations training, and our foundations course is for those who do not have any breastfeeding qualifications so far, or some people who would like an update. I have had breastfeeding counsellors and health professionals who've had some breastfeeding training come on this course. And you don't have to have breastfed or chest fed your own baby. You just have to have a passion for supporting expectant families and new families. And when you do the foundations training, you get the mindful breastfeeding course with it as well. But you just have to finish the foundations program first. And the reason why that's so important to me is it's crucial to me that anybody who becomes a mindful breastfeeding practitioner has that grounding, that knowledge, that good quality lactation education first. Nothing complex, but a good grounding in the basics. So what you would get with training with us is the basic lactation support training plus the mindful breastfeeding course. It's a blended learning style. So what I mean by that is you do most of the learning online, but with the foundations course only. This is not going to apply to people who already have a breastfeeding qualification. The foundations course has a live day element, and that can be done either online or in person a couple of times throughout the year. So you just do that once, and then once you've done that, that forms your assessment for foundations. then you move on to the mindful breastfeeding program. When you train with us, you get teaching plans and resources so that you can get started straight away. I offer continuous supervision and further learning for the whole time after you've trained with us, so long as you stay as a mindful breastfeeding practitioner and you recertify every 2 years, then you can continue getting supervision and support and learning from me. And we also have, even if I do say so myself, a lovely supportive community here at the Mindful Breastfeeding School. So as far as I'm aware, this is the only breastfeeding education course that includes that brain-body connection and lactation together and gives you mindfulness and positivity tools for supporting mental well-being and breastfeeding. And just here's a little bit about why mindful breastfeeding is different. So we think about the mind, body, and crucially, connection between parent and baby, and also the connection of the parent to themselves is so key in how breastfeeding actually goes. And here's a little bit about our wellbeing philosophy. So this kind of underpins everything that we do at the Mindful Breastfeeding School, so that we're really helping parents to have a holistic experience of their breastfeeding support and also just their, new parenting experience. So self-compassion is where we start, because I don't know about you, but I find that new parents are always being tough on themselves, especially if we're seeing them and they're having breastfeeding problems. Then there's often a lot of negative self-talk. They often feel not very good about themselves, not very good about their bodies. So if we, and I'm sure all of you who work in breastfeeding support already do encourage mothers, parents to talk kindly to themselves. But we like to think of, self-compassion running through everything that we do. So there's no blame, and that we help people to feel more positively about themselves, because that in itself helps milk to flow, which is what we want and what they want to. Physical body is our understanding that tension and negative emotions can live in our body, and through movement and looking after our bodies that we can help shift that and move through emotions that aren't helpful for us. The autonomic nervous system is kind of the sciencey bit behind mindful breastfeeding, so that understanding of when we're relaxed and when we're stressed and how that impacts our body physiologically, but then also how it impacts our relationships, including those of us and our babies as well. So that is a really key piece of learning. C is about community. So I love community. It means a lot to me, and we know that when people have support of others around them, that they do better and feel better. So we share classes, group sessions that you can do, you can offer to people in your own community. Exploration is about helping parents to understand how they're feeling, why they're feeling it, really bringing to the surface what's going on beneath, because those things can all impact breastfeeding and how they feel about it and how they feel about themselves. And we use that knowledge, what they, through exploration, through their feelings and their beliefs, to increase their self-belief. To this kind of the end line, if you like, after self-compassion, is how can we help this person to believe in themselves, to believe in their ability to feed their child in the way that they want to. Study after study after study, and I can tell you it's over 250 studies worldwide have shown that parents who have a higher self-efficacy, so a higher belief in themselves, in their ability to feed their baby in the way they want to and meet their own infant feeding goals, whatever they may be, if they believe in that more, then they are more likely to breastfeed exclusively, and they're more likely to breastfeed for longer. So this self-belief piece is embedded in research again and again and again and cross-culturally, and that's why I think it's should be a really important part of lactation support. So if you choose to train with us, you would get everything you need to run antenatal classes, one-to-one sessions with expectant parents. And yes, you get the kind of everyday stuff. This is how you latch your baby. This is how breastfeeding works. But you also, all of it is mindful breastfeeding is woven in, really thinking about the brain-body connection, using tools to help parents to kind of yeah, be able to calm their nervous system and be more relaxed, even when things are stressful, which they will be, as we know, those of us who are parents. We've also got a postnatal 6-week course called Mindful Baby, which you can use with families. But all the mindful breastfeeding tools are completely flexible. So if you've already got a lactation program or something that you share, or you already run classes, you can use mindful breastfeeding tools just to enhance them, to bring in the mind-body connection, to bring in some new language, some new conversations into what it is you already offer. And I offer mindful breastfeeding with all of my lactation support. With some families, I use it more than others. But I know that those who are providing lactation support find it really, really useful addition to what they already offer. So just a little visual about how it works here. So here's the foundations bit, and this is what we go over on in foundations: communication skills, how breastfeeding works, latching and positioning, and then common breastfeeding problems. And then this is the mindful breastfeeding bit. So for people, when you've done foundations, you move on to this. But for those who have already got a breastfeeding qualification, you would come straight onto the program. So we've got the background to mindful breastfeeding philosophy. So, what we talk about, the history of mindfulness, child development type stuff, a bit more about the kind of autonomic nervous system as well. Then we discover, so I'll bring in the neuroscience and teach you about how, the different elements of the autonomic nervous system, what's happening in the body and the mind, and how we can help parents take control of that a little bit in a way that works for them. Consolidation is about really familiarizing yourself and getting to know the tools so that you are confident in using them and you have tried them on yourself. And all of my teaching is inside out learning. So what I mean by that is I really believe that to be able to promote something or offer something to families, ideally, when it comes to tools, we should have tried them ourselves and felt the benefits of them ourselves. So that's what consolidation is all about. It's about using them, becoming familiar with them. And then integration is all about how you set up your business, how what you're going to include, and really thinking about, the stuff we were talking about in step 2. What's this going to look like for you? What are the next steps for you? And then Flourish is our last module. This isn't part of the course to qualify. You qualify after integration, and in this section you do some two case studies, and then you can qualify. But Flourish, I would highly recommend, particularly if you are wanting to have paid for services, then Flourish is our sort of business growth section. That's just a visual in a different way. We've got Mindful Breastfeeding Foundations here, and then this is the program. This is where you start if you're already trained in breastfeeding support. And then step 4, I think this is so important, especially when we're talking about being a business. And this is about sharing your services. And I do support you with this through the Flourish section of the course, thinking about how are you going to market your services, whether they're online or in person. You need, if you have in-person services, which 95% of people who come and train with me do, then you need in-person marketing techniques, not just online. I think so many people think that it's all about Instagram, and it's useful to have an online presence, but actually it's really in-person networking and meeting people and sharing what you do that's going to make the biggest difference in your in-person services and in your business. You've got to think about how you're going to set up a community so that people know who you are and what you do. How are you going to become the person known for breastfeeding support in your community? And then, I want to help you continue working with any barriers or blocks that are standing in your way. And what I mean by that is when we come from an NHS or a volunteer background, sometimes it can be really hard to price our services and ask people to pay us money for what we offer. So it's kind of understanding that and then being willing to work on the personal self-beliefs that we have around that. And it can take work, it can take time, but you can definitely get there with right support. That's just a little bit of feedback. from somebody who trained with me. I can't even. That's from Rebecca. So she was from the Village Midwives. She loves doing the mindful breastfeeding workshops for her antenatal classes, which is always really nice to know. The Foundations program is coming up. And so if you were interested in Foundations, if you didn't already have a breastfeeding qualification, you would start with us and you start on the online content. We have the live days for Foundations in person on the 2nd of March. Jess, who's on here with us, she came to the last one. And then online the 9th of March. So you would choose one or the other, because obviously London isn't always possible for everyone to get to. And yeah, so if you were going to come to those live dates, you'd want to start with the modules so that you could get the content finished by then. So ideally starting in the next couple of weeks with your online training. Once we'd had the live days together, then you would move on to the program, which is all online. But with the Mindful Breastfeeding Foundations and the Mindful Breastfeeding program, I give you weekly Q&A support sessions so that you're never on your own with it. You've always got a chance to come and chat with me online and ask questions. We've also got a community where you can ask questions at any time and we'll come and answer them for you. So that's just some of the pricing for the for Foundations. So this will be Foundations and the Mindful Breastfeeding program. For people who don't have a breastfeeding qualification, I should have crossed this out, this access all areas. I've actually got 2 people booked on this now who are having coaching with me, and that's my capacity, unfortunately. So I've only got the this option here, which is your 2 courses, your Foundations in the program. You get your live session, whether that's online or in person. You get all of your class line. Basically, you get everything you need: relaxation and resources, our ongoing support. We post a pack of resources to you, and as I said, we give support and learning after the course. So you're always going to be supported by. We would never teach breastfeeding skills to people and then expect them to go off, and not have backup when something unusual or something they haven't learned comes along. That is definitely not our ethos. So we're always there for you once you finish your training. And then here's a little bit about the program. So the program, people who have already got a breastfeeding qualification, whether that be peer supporter, whether that be breastfeeding counsellor or a lactation consultant, you can come and train on the Mindful Breastfeeding program starting anytime. I sometimes, if I've got health professionals sometimes as well who do their BFI training regularly, and that's fine too. And after you've finished this, you would become a mindful breastfeeding practitioner once you've done your homework and finished the content. As I said, we have weekly live support sessions. Those were on the teaching software, but I'm actually not definite. I think we're going to be moving them back to Facebook, and we tried something for a year and I think it's worked very well. So, but anyway, wherever there will be an option for you to come every week and talk to me online and let me answer your questions. So this course is £695, or you can pay £83 a month for 9 months. It's blended learning. What I mean by that is you work on your own pace, but you also have the opportunity to come in every week and ask me questions, and I can go over anything and add bits for you. You've also got the option to come on our live training day, although that would be an extra cost, but that option is open to you if you wanted to come and do some in-person training with me. We have the support sessions, and you get everything else that I talked about on the Foundations course. And I think this is really important when we're talking about business side of things and how could we make this work as an income stream. So I just want to use this example here, and it's going to take a little while to build up to these kind of numbers, because you've got to put it together. You've got to let people know that it's happening. And so it does take a little while to build this up. But 3-session antenatal courses, so the mindful breastfeeding antenatal classes are 3 sessions. So that's £75 to £150 per couple. I've given quite wide-ranging pricing because I know my students who live in Wales compared to my students who live in London, you know, what they charge is completely different. Not Wales is just one example. There's many other parts of the country that you're not going to necessarily charge as much in London. So it really is, you can charge what you want, but this just gives you a rough idea of the range of prices that people charge at the moment. So that would bring you £75 to £150 per couple for the course. Then you've got 6-week postnatal mindful breastfeeding group, which is £60 to £120 per parent and baby. So if you were to run one of these each month with 4 to 6 people in each, you'd be looking at an income between £540 and £1,620 per month. Now, bear in mind, that is your turnover. That isn't, you know, paying for insurance or any of the other expenses that you might have with running a class, like room hire or, you know, bits and pieces that you might want to buy to run that group. But that just gives you a rough idea of what you could bring in once you'd built up to those sorts of numbers. This is Sarah. Sarah trained me a few years ago. She runs a Green Moon community and Milkworks. She does so many things now. She has a walking group. She runs some parent and baby stuff outside, and she also runs a breastfeeding support group, lots of different things. And Leanne traded me quite a few years ago now, and she added it into her baby massage business that she did. And that is the end. So do let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate you being here. And what I should have said as well at the end was that you can always book a call with me if you want to talk about any of this further. I'll be sharing the link for that in the email. I'm also just going to put the link for the courses into the chat box. And anyone who's got a question, you can either put it into the chat box or you can put your hand up. I'm going to just stop